Hi, welcome to my channel Stars of Terra. Every story you hear here is told in my own real voice. Real emotion, real effort, no reused content, original human storytelling. So let's begin. The Galactic Council had ruled the spiral arm for 12,000 cycles. They believed there were no unknowns left in the mapped stars. Every species catalogued, every fleet accounted for, every anomaly studied and archived. War itself had become a predictable science, measured in fleet tonnage and energy yield, when the Carthix Dominion declared open extermination against the frontier worlds. The Council responded with confidence. They assembled the largest defensive armada in recorded history, a radiant wall of battleships stretching across 3-star systems. Billions watched the live transmission as admirals promised swift and decisive victory. Then the sky fractured. At first it appeared as gravitational distortion beyond the battle line. Sensors failed to classify the signatures, unable to match them to any known propulsion system. The distortion widened like a tear in fabric, revealing silhouettes darker than interstellar void. A fleet emerged, silent and without transponder codes. No registry matched their hull patterns. No archives contained their design. Their ships were enormous yet unnervingly elegant, geometry bending light around their edges. The Council demanded identification. There was no reply. The Dominion Armada opened fire first, unleashing coordinated barrages capable of cracking planets. Energy beams and antimatter torpedoes streaked across space like artificial suns. The unknown fleet did not maneuver. They did not deploy shields. They did not retaliate immediately. They simply endured, and when they finally responded, they did so with a single synchronized pulse. It was not a weapon the Council recognized. It was not plasma, not kinetic, not radiation. It was silence weaponized. Across the battlefield, Dominion vessels blinked out of existence, not destroyed, not fragmented, simply erased from measurable reality. Entire carrier groups vanished in less than a breath. Council observers froze in horror as tactical displays emptied. Within 70 seconds, the Dominion Armada ceased to exist. No debris fields remained, no escape pods registered. Only the unrecorded fleet hovered where a war once raged. For the first time in millennia, the Galactic Council did not issue a proclamation of victory. They panicked. Emergency sessions were convened within the crystalline halls of the Council citadel. Holographic projections replayed the annihilation from every recorded angle. Experts argued over data that refused to obey known physics. Some claimed the fleet was an ancient precursor civilization returning from myth. Others whispered about extra-dimensional entities crossing boundaries long thought theoretical. A few dared to suggest a hidden power that had watched the galaxy for ages. None of the theories explained why the fleet remained motionless after the battle. They held position at the edge of Council territory, neither advancing nor retreating, like sentinels waiting for judgment. Attempts at communication intensified. Mathematical sequences, cultural greetings, quantum-encoded apologies, every transmission vanished into the void without acknowledgement. Meanwhile, frontier systems erupted in chaos. Trade collapsed overnight. Species that once relied on Council protection questioned its authority. If such a fleet could appear unannounced, what else lurked beyond their star charts? Fear spread faster than light through subspace networks. Markets crashed. Colonies prepared evacuation protocols. Religious sects proclaimed the arrival of cosmic arbiters. The Council's high strategist finally spoke the unthinkable truth. The Dominion had been erased effortlessly. If the unknown fleet intended hostility, the Council itself would not survive a single engagement. Debate turned to desperation. Should they mobilize preemptively? Should they surrender territory as tribute? Should they attempt diplomacy with a power that ignored their existence entirely? Then the fleet moved, not toward the Council core worlds, not toward vulnerable colonies. They repositioned above the remains of the battlefield and began constructing something vast. Massive arcs of energy formed a lattice stretching millions of kilometers. It resembled a gate, though its destination was incomprehensible. Scanners detected gravitational harmonics, and like anything recorded, space itself seemed to fold obediently around the structure. The Council's panic deepened, because whatever these beings were building, it was not a weapon aimed at conquest. It was a doorway, and something on the other side was waiting. The gate activated without warning. A sphere of controlled singularity stabilized at its center, radiating structured energy patterns. From within the sphere, transmissions finally emerged. The message was simple and delivered in perfectly translated galactic standard. Conflict threshold exceeded, intervention protocol executed, stability restored. The Council chamber fell into stunned silence. They were not conquerors, they were regulators. A second transmission followed. This region was flagged for escalation risk 9,000 cycles ago. Observation continued until intervention criteria were satisfied. The implication was devastating. The galaxy had been monitored long before the Council's founding there. Wars catalogued, their politics measured like laboratory variables. The Dominion's genocidal campaign had triggered a threshold. The Unrecorded fleet had not chosen sides. They had eliminated instability. Council representatives demanded clarification. What authority justified such interference? Who granted them dominion over existence? The reply was chilling in its calm precision. Authority is derived from capacity. You lacked the means to prevent systemic collapse. We did not. Data streams poured into Council archives. Proof of countless other regions stabilized in identical fashion. Entire wars ended before they could spread beyond containment zones, and then came the warning. Escalation patterns indicate recurrent probability within your governance structure. Reform is advised. Failure to adapt will prompt corrective action. The message did not threaten. It simply stated inevitability across the galaxy. Citizens watched as the gate pulsed brighter beyond it. Silhouettes of additional fleets waited in perfect formation. The Council understood at last. The fleet that erased the Dominion was merely a fraction of something incomprehensibly vast, and it had been watching them for millennia. The gate remained open for 3 standard days. During that time, no further destruction occurred. No demands for tribute were issued instead. Detailed schematics accompanied the transmissions, technologies capable of stabilizing stars, energy systems that eliminated scarcity, defense grids that rendered planetary bombardment obsolete. The Council faced an impossible choice: admit their inadequacy and accept guidance, or cling to pride and risk annihilation under corrective intervention. Public opinion shifted rapidly. Species once divided by ideology united under a shared realization. They were not apex powers, they were subjects of observation. The High Strategist addressed the galaxy in a broadcast carried to every inhabited world. For the first time, humility replaced authority in his voice. He acknowledged their failures. He announced sweeping reforms. He invited collaboration instead of dominance. The Unrecorded fleet did not applaud. They did not congratulate. They simply observed. When the Council ratified its first interspecies non-aggression accord enforced by shared oversight, the gate began to close. Before it vanished, one final transmission echoed across the stars: autonomy preserved through responsibility. Continue accordingly. The structure dissolved into harmless particles of light. The fleet followed, slipping beyond measurable space without distortion. The battlefield was empty once more, but the silence felt different now. It was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of accountability. The Galactic Council had survived. Not because of strength, not because of strategy, but because something greater had chosen patience over extinction, and somewhere beyond mapped reality, eyes remained open, watching. In the cycles that followed the fleet's departure, the galaxy did not return to what it had been. The absence of the gate felt heavier than its presence. Every star system understood that survival had become conditional. The Galactic Council restructured itself from the foundation upward. Military budgets were redirected toward stabilization technologies. Former rival species were assigned joint oversight of planetary defense grids. Transparency replaced secrecy in strategic councils. For the first time in recorded history, war simulations were no longer designed to win, they were designed to prevent escalation beyond acceptable thresholds. Across former Dominion territories, reconstruction began under shared governance. Worlds once destined for extermination became symbols of fragile unity. Memorials were erected not to celebrate victory, but to remember how close extinction had come. Scientists studied the data gifted through the gate. They learned to reinforce stars against collapse. They learned to detect aggression patterns before fleets ever mobilized. They learned that power without restraint triggered attention. The phrase corrective action entered common language, spoken not with resentment, but with sobering respect. Children in academies were taught a new doctrine: strength is proven through control, dominion is temporary, responsibility is survival, and somewhere in classified observatories at the rim of mapped space, long-range instruments occasionally registered faint gravitational anomalies, not incursions, not threats, observations. The knowledge changed behavior more effectively than fear ever had. Conflicts that once would have ignited into sector-wide wars were mediated within days. Ambition evolved into stewardship, yet beneath the progress lingered a deeper realization. The galaxy had not been granted freedom, it had been granted probation. Still, probation meant opportunity. Opportunity to prove that intervention would never again be required. On the anniversary of the annihilated Armada, all member worlds dimmed their orbital lights for one silent hour. Not in mourning alone, but in acknowledgement. The sky remained Calm, the stars burned steadily, and beyond the edges of comprehension, the watchers continued their silent vigil, waiting to see whether this civilization had truly learned the difference between power and wisdom, because the next threshold, if crossed, would not require a warning, it would require correction, and the galaxy intended never to test that certainty again.